At present, materialists control the intellectual debate, but one day it will be idealists who are in charge. The great battlefield over which materialists and idealists fight concerns whether or not mathematics is real. Science believes that sensory matter is real and mathematics, the greatest emblem of thinking, an unreal, man-made abstraction. Ontological mathematics asserts that mathematics is real while mind-independent sensory matter of the type envisaged by scientists is an unreal, man-made abstraction. Isn't it extraordinary that there is almost no debate regarding this decisive topic? Science sweeps all before it and leads humanity into greater and greater error, as great as that of mainstream religion, but at least of more practical use. Philosophy has delivered much better solutions to existence than science, but not in any practical sense. The game changer for science, natural philosophy, was that it embraced mathematics and became quantitative and expressible in neat, general formulae. Philosophy did not become mathematical and hence did not become quantifiable and useful. It remained wholly speculative. Ontological mathematics changes all of this. Now rationalism and idealism, just like empiricism and materialism, can be expressed mathematically, and indeed much more rigorously and analytically than is the case with empiricism and materialism. It is inevitable that ontological mathematics will replace science, because it is far more effective, efficient and explanatory mathematically. The first mathematical worldview was that of Pythagoras, the founder of ontological mathematics, since he was the first to say that, despite appearances, everything is truly mathematical, made of mathematics and expressing beautiful mathematical relationships and laws. Plato presented an alternative worldview based on intelligible things, forms, and sensible stuff, matter. Everything in the world, according to this view, is made of sensible matter, but each thing contains a form which makes it intelligible. We can look at a tiger and a tree and know which is which because although each is made of matter, each is associated with a different intelligible form. For Plato, the intelligible world was radically separate from sensory matter. A super-being called the demiurge had to apply form to matter, like a sculptor shaping clay according to a preset design. Aristotle created a system called hylomorphism, where form, morphe, and matter, hyle, entered into combinations as part of the natural order of things. Forms came to be known as universals, and were distinguished from particulars, the sensory objects that instantiated them. So, for example, all humans instantiate the universal, human, while each is a particular human. The most important question regarding universals was where are they? If they weren't anywhere, how could they be real? For Plato, forms, universals, were real things in an ideal, perfect domain outside space and time, containing no matter. The forms belonged to the purely intelligible domain. The sensible domain was entirely excluded. This is a conclusion that no scientist could ever reach, and which they would be at pains to deny. A particular, sensible thing was designed, by the demiurge or one of his agents, with respect to the form that defined it. Aristotle migrated forms from Plato's transcendent immaterial domain to the immanent domain of matter. The only transcendent thing in Aristotle's worldview was God, pure matterless form, the ultimate universal, which animated the universe. It was the prime mover, while not itself moving. So, for Aristotle, things actually contained, in some way, the universal which defined them. If you cut something open, you wouldn't find its defining universal, but it was somehow in there. If you cut open a person, you don't find a person's mind or soul, and yet it's somehow there, although, to most people, its relationship to the body is completely obscure. Some people deny that there is any relationship at all because, they say, there is no soul at all. Scientists assert that there is no mind or soul, no animating agent separate from the body. The body itself contains all it needs to animate itself, although this ceases to be true at death. Since there is no agent that is linked to the body but is external to it, hence is independent of it, then, mind, must belong to the body and there can be nothing that survives death and has an afterlife, hence physical death is final. No scientist ever challenges this basic view. It never occurs to them that it might be fundamentally wrong. But if it is fundamentally wrong, then science itself is foundationally false. If scientists were to talk about forms and universals at all, as opposed to particular bodies, they would refer to something like DNA. A pregnant mother takes in food and drink as input and outputs a baby, which doesn't appear to be anything like reorganized food and drink, and yet, according to science, that's all it can ever be. It's the DNA code inside the baby that organizes the food and drink of its mother into a human, as opposed to a plant, or an insect, or a dog, or whatever. So, DNA is the universal. Every human being has the DNA associated with the universal, human. Every dog has the DNA associated with the universal, dog. In these terms, you could find the universal inside any living thing. It's the DNA code. It literally codes for that universal. Yet does DNA really have anything to do with life? DNA is made of lifeless, mindless, purposeless atoms. How does DNA code for life, mind, the unconscious, consciousness, subjectivity, free will, purpose, meaning, religious belief, poetry, love, and so on? Science invokes good old randomness to get things started, but how does the random movement of lifeless, mindless, purposeless atoms create life, mind, and purpose? It's comically silly to propose that it does. No. DNA codes for the physicality of a body, but not the life of the body. A corpse has the same DNA as the former living person. Life does not reside in DNA. The life of the body actually comes from something that isn't in the body at all, hence why life can go on when the body perishes. The life of the body is supplied by the mind, which is an immaterial, mathematically encoded entity outside space and time. It docks with the body, and there must be part of the DNA code that creates a mathematical platform for this mathematical docking procedure. In animals, the brain is where the mind most strongly interacts with the body, and is from where it controls the body via the nervous system. For Descartes, the soul interacted with the brain via the pineal gland. In fact, the soul interacts with every cell in the body, and every cell dies when the interaction ceases. The strongest interaction is via brain cells, hence physical damage to brain cells can radically degrade the quality of the interaction. It's the mind, not the body, that contains life, the unconscious, the ability to become conscious, subjectivity, free will, meaning, purpose, striving, will, desire, and so on. The body inherits these, by virtue of being linked to a mind. However, when the link is dissolved at death, the material body goes back to exactly what it was before, food and drink, a physical mush. It's prime matter, without any universal, any code, to organize it. The monadic mind is a mathematical code, and it needs a physical, a biological, code to allow it to interact with bodies, non-minds. This is what DNA supplies. DNA is not the code of life. DNA is the code for linking a body, an organized collection of food, drink and air, to an actual life form, a monadic mind. DNA is sexually transmitted. That's how we create a child from two parents. But the form of life is not sexually transmitted. That belongs to the eternal and necessary monadic mind, i.e., living mind is an essential, indispensable aspect of life. Reality is not a dead thing that miraculously produces life. It is an inherently living thing, made of essential living minds. The human is not an eternal and necessary universal. There was a time when there were no humans, and there will be a time in the future when there are no humans. So, a clear distinction has to be made between true universals, which are eternal and necessary and built into existence, and pseudo-universals, which are temporal and contingent, hence not built into existence. Plato's forms, universals, and those of Aristotle, were all imagined to be eternal and necessary, in which case there was an eternal and necessary universal for human. Neither Plato nor Aristotle thought in evolutionary terms, so it didn't occur to them that universals can come into existence and be widely instantiated in particular bodies or objects and also go out of existence in due course. One day, DNA, and everything it coded for, will vanish from the earth. Many people, of an empiricist and materialist mindset, rejected the idea of universals of any kind, whether eternal and necessary or temporal and contingent. They imagined the world to be one purely of material particulars. Most scientists hold the view that the universe comprises only material objects, particulars, and mathematics, supposedly an unreal, man-made abstraction, is in some way able to provide a universal analysis of particular things. Of those thinkers who accepted the reality of universals, one of the most prominent was St. Thomas Aquinas. Philosopher S.E. Frost Jr. wrote, St. Thomas held that all universals existed in the mind of God. To explain the world which we experience through our senses, St. Thomas followed Aristotle in introducing matter as that upon which universals work. Nature, for him, was a union of universals and matter. It is matter which makes one tree different from another. All trees contain the universal treeness, but they differ. They are elms, oaks, spruces, tall, short, green, red, and the like, because of the different amounts of matter which each contains. All the universe, then, is a result of the coming together of matter and universals, and the many things in the universe differ in the amount of matter which they contain. For St. Thomas, God created the world out of nothing. He was the cause of both matter and the universals. Further, God is continually creating the world as he brings universals and matter together to produce new objects. Thus, all creation did not happen at one time, but creation is going on all the time and all about us. How did the Christian God create the universe out of nothing at all? According to Aquinas, God created prime matter out of nothing and then applied the forms contained in his own mind to this prime matter to create the hylomorphic things of the world. The matter, the stuff of particulars, provided the sensible aspect of reality, while the forms, universals, provided the intelligible aspect. Matter was created, the forms were not. The intelligibility of reality is therefore eternal. It cannot be brought into existence, as science fallaciously claims. For Plato, the demiurge applied the designs provided by the perfect, eternal forms to pre-existing, eternal, prime matter, closely linked to space, the container of sensibility, to create the sensible universe. The demiurge acted like a sculptor, sculpting the universal clay, prime matter. For Aristotle, God was pure formless matter outside the physical universe of matter. The forms, universals, apparent in the physical universe were built into the hylomorphic things of the universe. Aristotle said that the universe was eternal. Aquinas, who accepted most of Aristotle's philosophy, had to reject the eternalist aspect of Aristotle's thinking since Christianity is a creationist ideology. Christianity claims that God created a temporal and contingent universe out of nothing. Science says that the temporal and contingent material universe randomly sprang out of nothing at all, for no reason, by no mechanism, for no purpose. Also that science can avoid any reference to God, mind, eternal and necessary forms, concepts, universals or ontological mathematics. Ontological mathematics asserts that eternal and necessary monadic minds constitute the eternal and necessary foundation of existence. The collection of all these monadic minds is the hive mind, which can be called God. God makes the material universe from its own nodes, its own monadic minds, which supply it with basis thoughts. Sinusoidal waves equals mathematical universals, sufficient to make all the temporal and contingent wave functions that constitute the particular things of the spacetime universe of matter. Ontological mathematics naturally supports a wave-defined account of reality, similar to the one proposed by quantum physics, except whereas standard quantum physics proposes a probabilistic, indeterministic account of reality, ontological mathematics is about real, deterministic wave functions where the wave functions are technically sinusoidal thought functions. Everything is made of thought. Thoughts are mathematical. Basis thoughts are sinusoidal waves. Sinusoidal waves are the means to link mathematical minds to quantum physics and the scientific spacetime universe of matter. In the future, the identification of basis thoughts with sinusoidal waves, and so with quantum mechanical wave functions, will be seen as the most decisive leap in human intellectual evolution ever taken. Quantum physics is produced by deterministic monadic minds, not by indeterministic, probabilistic processes that occur in some abstract domain and randomly collapse. How? To create the material universe. Scientific matter is now something incredibly bizarre. Matter, for the ancient Greeks, comprised eternal, solid lumps called atoms. Today, matter refers to something that manifests itself when observed. It apparently collapses out of an abstract non-local, probabilistic wave function to create a local phenomenon. If anyone believes that's solid matter, they have a very odd idea of what matter is. We're not in Kansas anymore.